In the silent emptiness of space, a large silver vessel drifted through the wreckage of forgotten worlds. Its name was the Zathari Core, a research ship from the Andrix galaxy. It belonged to an advanced alien race known as the Virelians, creatures of tall frames, pale silver skin, and eyes that shimmered like liquid glass. They were known for their knowledge and arrogance, always searching for remains of lost civilizations to prove their superiority. The ship moved slowly between the broken remains of metal and dust. The scanners picked up signals that were faint but unusual. Inside the control chamber, dozens of alien scientists stood around floating screens that showed fragments of an ancient battle. They had been exploring the region for months and found nothing of true value. Many of them were growing tired, ready to move on. The leader of the expedition, Dr. Valrix, was a proud scientist. His long head crest glowed faintly under the lights as he gave commands. His voice carried calm control, but underneath it was a hunger for discovery. "Expand the scan range," he ordered. "There may still be something in this debris field. This area was once the path of the old Terran explorers. I want to know what remains of them." The other scientists exchanged glances. The word Terran meant human in their tongue. Humans were a species long gone from memory, known only through scattered records and myths. The Virelians saw them as a weak and short-lived race that burned themselves out long ago. As the scanners widened their sweep, a low alarm sounded. A signal appeared, faint, rhythmic, and pulsing with strange energy. It came from a piece of wreckage hidden within a field of ice and rock. Dr. Valrix leaned forward. "Bring it aboard." Within hours, a retrieval drone pulled in a large object covered in thick layers of ice. It looked like a capsule, cylindrical, with marks and scratches that had faded over centuries. The alien scientists gathered in the main lab as the object was placed on a glowing platform. The ice steamed under the ship's controlled atmosphere, slowly revealing its surface. The first to speak was Rival, a younger scientist with bright blue eyes. "It seems to be a preservation pod. Primitive design, but the material is still intact. There is an energy core inside, though it is nearly dead." Dr. Valrix studied the readings with interest. "Open the outer layer carefully. I want to see what these ancient Terrans tried to preserve." The metal layers peeled back one by one, releasing a burst of cold mist into the lab. Inside the pod lay a body, frozen solid, wrapped in a suit of strange material. The form was unmistakably humanoid. A man with pale skin, short dark hair, and a calm expression on his face as if he were sleeping. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter broke out among the alien researchers. "A human," one of them said with amusement. "I thought they all vanished ages ago." Another added, "So fragile. Look at those small limbs. Their bodies were never made for space travel. How did they expect to survive beyond their own planet?" The lab filled with mocking voices. Some took pictures, others made jokes, calling the frozen man a relic of failure. But Dr. Valrix did not laugh. He stood close to the pod, watching the faint light still flickering inside the control panel near the man's chest. "Strange," he murmured. "The power cell should have died thousands of years ago, yet it still carries a trace of energy." Rival adjusted the scanners. "I am detecting a biosignature, very faint but still present. It could be a memory residue or cell reaction. However, it is impossible for any life to remain after such a long time." Dr. Valrix nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But this pod should be studied in full detail. Bring it to Chamber 9. We will run a deep analysis." The team carried the pod into a wide circular room filled with instruments and blue holographic lights. Tubes ran along the ceiling carrying glowing gas that powered the machinery. The room smelled of cold metal and sterile air. They placed the pod on a platform and connected cables to its sides. The holographic monitors displayed streams of data in alien symbols. "The human tissue is preserved perfectly," said Rival as he examined the readings. "The preservation liquid inside the pod is of high efficiency, far better than what we use today for organic storage." How could such a simple race build something this advanced? Dr. Valrix replied. Perhaps they were not as simple as we believed. This technology may be older than our first star cruisers. The scientists began taking small samples from the outer ice. They studied the material and found traces of unknown compounds. As they continued, some of them made new jokes about human bravery, calling it a desperate act of a dying world. Dr. Valrix allowed them their amusement but continued studying quietly. He knew discovery often began with something underestimated. When the scans reached the inner layer of the pod, an unexpected signal emerged. The screen flashed red, showing erratic lines. Doctor, Ravel said in surprise, I am reading a pulse signal. It is repeating at steady intervals. Dr. Valrix frowned. A pulse signal? From where? From inside the chest area of the human. It resembles a life rhythm pattern. The room went silent again. Several scientists gathered around the pod. The monitors began to beep faster. That is impossible, said one. No living cell can survive for this long. It must be a malfunction. But the beeping grew stronger. The pattern became clearer. It was not random. It was steady, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Revel looked at the others, nervous for the first time. It seems alive. Dr. Valrix's voice dropped low. Increase the scan resolution. I want every detail. The scanners emitted bright beams of light sweeping over the frozen body. Data filled the screens faster than they could process it. Brain activity readings flickered weakly, then stabilized. A faint heat signature formed around the head and chest. Doctor, Reval said in disbelief. The ice is melting from inside. He is generating heat. Valrix's eyes widened. That cannot be natural. Something is reactivating him. They checked the pod controls again. The old energy cell that had been nearly dead was now glowing brighter. Power readings rose sharply. The machinery around them hummed as though reacting to the change. Dr. Valrix stepped back. Deactivate the connection. Do it now. But before they could disconnect the cables, a sudden spark of blue energy shot through the wires, running across the lab's surface. Lights flickered. The room darkened for a brief second. Then silence returned. Smoke rose from the pod's edge. The ice had cracked completely and the figure inside became visible. The human's face was calm, his eyelids closed and his body unmoving. The aliens waited for a reaction, but nothing happened. Some laughed again, nervously this time. See? One said. The machine failed. The reaction was just a power loop. Dr. Valrix, however, looked unsettled. He watched the faint rise and fall of the man's chest. It was almost too small to notice, but it was there. He whispered. He is breathing. The others turned to him in disbelief. Breathing? That is not possible. Valrix pointed to the screen showing the life pattern. It was no longer faint. It was strong and steady. The scientists stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Their laughter had faded completely. Valrix stepped closer to the pod, his reflection shining on the glass. He could see his own curious face beside the human's peaceful one. Who are you? He murmured softly. And how did you survive the death of your world? Outside the ship, the stars shimmered quietly. The Zathari core drifted through the void, unaware that it had just awakened something that should have remained asleep. Deep within the frozen man's mind, a memory stirred, flashes of blue skies, oceans, and the sound of a heartbeat echoing through time. Somewhere in that silence a thought formed, a will refusing to die. The machines around the pod hummed once more, and the faintest flicker passed through the human's eyelids. None of the alien scientists noticed it yet, but his body had already begun to warm. And so began the story of the frozen human, the one who would soon open his eyes and change everything the aliens thought they knew about humanity. The human inside the pod stirred faintly, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm so small it could almost be mistaken for the vibration of the machinery. The alien scientists crowded around, their expressions shifting from amusement to curiosity, and finally to something unfamiliar, unease. Dr. Valrix stood closest to the pod. He had studied countless species in his life, but something about this human made him pause. There was a sense of raw resilience emanating from the frozen figure, as if centuries of isolation and silence had not broken him. He reached out, lightly tapping the pod. The glass vibrated under his touch. "Increase the temperature slowly," Valrix commanded. "We need to see how the organism reacts to controlled warming." Revel adjusted the settings. Warm air hissed into the pod, melting frost that had settled over the human for hundreds of years. The ice shrank gradually, revealing more details of his face. The man's features were calm and symmetrical, with strong bone structure and a quiet intensity. Even through the frost, his expression seemed aware, almost as if he were studying the scientists in return. Several of the younger Varelians could not contain themselves. One of them, a thin, pale scientist named Zilnar, laughed and nudged a companion. "Look at him. Just a fragile human. Imagine the arrogance of his kind. They thought they could explore the stars with bodies like that." Another alien, taller and heavier, waved a long hand dismissively. "It is a joke. A species that failed to survive on its own planet. Preserved in a tiny pod. How could we even respect this creature?" The lab echoed with their laughter, harsh and mechanical in the sterile space. They mocked the human, poked at the pod with tools, and whispered jokes about his extinct race. Dr. Valrix, however, remained silent. He observed every reading, every pulse, and every faint energy fluctuation. His instincts told him that what he saw was not weakness. It was something else, something far beyond the limits of their understanding. "Bring the analytical instruments closer," he instructed. "We need to monitor every reaction inside this pod." Rival complied, adjusting the holographic scanners and energy meters. The display showed a spike in biosignals. Every monitor flickered with data that defied normal logic. "Doctor," Rival said, his voice tinged with disbelief, "the energy core is reacting to the heat increase. It is generating patterns we cannot identify. It almost seems—" "Aware," Valrix frowned. "Aware? Are you suggesting the organism has consciousness?" Rival shook his head. "I cannot explain it. The signals resemble nothing in our database. It is as if the human's body recognizes the environment and responds independently." The other scientists scoffed, dismissing Rival's observation. "Do not be absurd," Zilnar said. "It is merely a reaction to temperature and chemical imbalance. Nothing more. These creatures are nothing compared to us." Valrix ignored their words and focused on the human's chest. The frost was retreating further. The suit he wore, something like modern Terran survival gear, was intact, its inner layers still functional. The monitors began to show another pattern, this time emanating from the man's brain. A faint wave pulsed, irregular but consistent. "What is that?" asked a new voice from the back of the room. It belonged to Talrex, the ship's senior biologist. His three eyes narrowed as he observed the monitors. "It is a neural reaction, but it is too faint and too complex to interpret with our instruments." "This is unexpected," the scientists murmured among themselves. Some glanced at the pod with suspicion. Their mockery softened, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Dr. Valrix took a deep breath. "Prepare the pod for full unfreezing. We will bring him back to active life. It is the only way to understand the technology and biology of this species." The scientists exchanged nervous glances. They had assumed humans were extinct, incapable of surviving in the harsh conditions of space for centuries. To revive one seemed like a challenge beyond their expectations. Rival activated the unfreezing protocols. Warm air flowed steadily through the pod, and small lights indicated energy transfer. The ice melted gradually, revealing the human's arms and torso. The suit beneath the ice looked tight and functional. Even after centuries, it had preserved him perfectly. As the ice melted further, the human's hands became visible. They were delicate, yet his fingers were long and capable. The Varelians leaned in, unable to hide a flicker of interest. "Remarkable," Talrex whispered. "They were not designed for strength alone, yet these hands could build, repair, and survive in ways we cannot imagine." The pod began to hiss as more frost dissolved. The man's face emerged fully. His eyes were closed, his features serene, and his chest moved slowly. Even in this semi-frozen state, there was a subtle rhythm, a life force refusing to be ignored. Zilnar snorted. He is still weak. Even alive, he is nothing. We could crush him if we wanted. Dr. Valrix turned sharply. Do not underestimate him. Observe carefully. Sometimes the smallest creatures hold the greatest power. The unfreezing process continued. The pod emitted soft pulses of energy and the human's body reacted. Temperature readings rose steadily, his biological functions gradually coming online. His neural signals strengthened. Revel studied the brain scans with fascination. Doctor, his neural patterns are unlike anything in our records. He is adapting to the environment while still frozen. It is impossible. Valrix nodded. Impossible for us, perhaps, but not for him. Keep monitoring, but do not interfere. Let us see what the Terrans are capable of. The scientists observed quietly now. The earlier laughter and mockery had died down. A sense of tension filled the room like an invisible pressure. The human was no longer an object of ridicule. He was a mystery, a puzzle that challenged their knowledge. Minutes passed and the pod's temperature reached a safe level. The frost was gone. The human's body was now fully exposed. He lay still, his skin pale but unharmed. The suit clung to his frame, revealing a lean and strong physique. Even motionless, he radiated a presence that demanded attention. Shall we open the pod? Asked Revel hesitantly. Valrix studied the monitors one last time. Yes, carefully, do not rush. We are about to witness history. The top of the pod slowly lifted. A hiss of warm air escaped as the hatch opened. The human stirred slightly, his fingers twitching. His chest rose faster. A soft breath escaped his lips. The room was silent. No one dared speak. Then the human's eyes moved beneath closed lids. One eyelid flickered and the other followed. For a moment it seemed he was still dreaming. The Varelians held their breath. Their mockery had vanished completely, replaced by a tense anticipation. Finally the man's eyes snapped open. Bright, sharp, and alive, they shone with a clarity that startled everyone. He blinked slowly, taking in the strange environment. The alien faces reflected in his eyes, pale and alien, tall and wide-eyed with wonder. The scientists recoiled slightly. Some stumbled backward, unsure what to do. Valrix stepped forward calmly. He is alive. He is conscious. Observe his responses carefully. The human's gaze swept across the room. He looked at the equipment, the lights, the strange faces. His lips moved slightly, forming words that were inaudible to the aliens. He tried to remember language, to understand, to comprehend where he was and what had happened. Revel studied the readings. His cognitive functions are activating rapidly. His brain is analyzing everything at once. It is learning from observation alone. He is exceptional. Valrix nodded slowly. Not exceptional. Human. This is what our data underestimated. The Terrans were stronger than we ever believed. Zilnar's voice trembled. But he is just one. He cannot be strong enough to survive here. Talrex frowned. Do not be so sure. This human has survived centuries frozen in space. That alone is proof of endurance we cannot fully comprehend. The human raised his head, trying to sit up. His movements were slow but purposeful. The aliens watched in awe. Every motion was deliberate. He was alive, aware, and cautious. Dr. Valrix whispered, "Careful. Do not provoke him. Let him adjust. Watch and learn." The frozen human, Captain Elias Kane as his identification tag later revealed, opened his eyes fully now. They were dark, alert, and intelligent. Every feature of his face radiated determination and calm. He was no longer a subject to mock. He was a being of potential, a survivor and perhaps the last living human in the galaxy. Outside the lab, the stars shimmered silently. Inside, the room was filled with tension and wonder. The Varelians realized that they had awakened something extraordinary, something they did not yet understand. And at the center of it all, Captain Elias Kane's eyes remained wide open, observing, learning, and preparing for what was to come. The story of the frozen human had only just begun. The lab was silent save for the faint hum of machinery. Captain Elias Kane, the frozen human who had just awakened, lay on the platform, his dark eyes scanning the room with intensity. He took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the warmth of the air for the first time in centuries. His body was stiff, yet his mind worked quickly, recalling fragments of memory, Earth's oceans, the roar of engines, the hum of his own ship, and the faces of his crewmates long gone. The Varelians stood around him in awe. They had expected a weak, trembling organism, but what they saw instead was a human alive in every sense, cautious, aware, and undeniably alert. Dr. Valrix remained calm, but his eyes shone with excitement and curiosity. "Observe," he said quietly. "Do not interfere. Let him adjust to his surroundings." Elias lifted his head slightly. His movements were careful, measured. Every muscle, though stiff from centuries of freezing, obeyed his will. His gaze swept over the alien faces, noting their height, their pale silver skin, their eyes that shimmered unnaturally. He did not understand their language, but he understood intention, curiosity, unease, respect. "Can he understand us?" Zilnar whispered almost to himself. Valrix shook his head. "Not yet, but he is observing, learning. Humans adapt quickly. That is their greatest strength." Elias tried to speak. The muscles in his throat were weak from disuse, and his voice emerged as a hoarse whisper. He tested words from his fading memory. "Where am I?" His accent was thick, foreign to the Varelians, but the sound carried authority even in its frailty. The scientists looked at one another nervously. None had expected sound from this fragile creature. The hoarse human voice seemed to fill the room with weight they could feel, even if they could not fully comprehend it. Revo leaned forward, adjusting his translator device. "He is attempting to communicate," he said. "Activate translation protocols." The device hummed and flickered. Slowly it began repeating Elias's words in Varelian tones. "Where am I?" Dr. Valrix nodded. He understands he is in a different environment. His cognition is faster than expected. "Watch carefully." Elias's eyes darted around the room. He saw the instruments, the monitors, the tools. He saw the pod that had protected him for centuries and the human's technological remnants within it. His mind raced. He did not know who these beings were or what time it was, but he knew one thing: survival. That had always been humanity's instinct, and it was still alive in him. Human history. Elias whispered to himself in a voice barely audible. He reached toward the edge of the platform, testing the weight of his limbs. His fingers gripped the metal lightly. Strength returned slowly, but it returned. Zilnar's voice trembled. "He moves. With intention. That is unexpected." Valrix remained silent. He was observing every neural reading, every muscular reaction. The human's body was astonishing. Not only had it survived centuries frozen, but it also began recovering rapidly under optimal conditions. Revo studied the monitors with growing amazement. His brain activity is off the charts. Memory recall is happening while his body is still weak. He is adapting to the environment at the same time. Elias sat up fully now. His movements were deliberate, almost elegant in their careful precision. The lab lights reflected in his dark eyes. He scanned the alien faces, noting their gestures, their postures. He did not understand their language, but he could sense emotion, curiosity, doubt, caution. "Who are you?" he croaked, testing his voice further. The translator repeated it, and the Varelians whispered among themselves. They realized that this human was not merely alive. He was intelligent, aware, and ready to assess his situation. Dr. Valrix approached slowly. "We are researchers. You have been preserved for a very long time. Your species is thought extinct. We study life forms like yours to understand history." Elias's gaze hardened slightly. His memory flashed. images of his mission, of Earth, of the long journey into space to preserve knowledge. His lips pressed together. He did not yet trust them, but he understood their words. I was on a mission, he said slowly. To save data, knowledge, my people. His voice cracked. The weight of centuries pressed on him, but he forced himself to continue. They'd all gone. The Varelians were silent. None of them had expected the human to speak of loss. Their species rarely experienced emotion in the same way, and yet here it was. The pain of a species erased, spoken aloud with dignity. Valrix nodded slowly. We understand. That is why we preserve the pod. To recover your knowledge, your history. You are valuable. Elias looked at him sharply. Valuable? He asked, suspicion in his voice. Or curiosity? You laughed at me before, called me weak, called my people failures. Zilnar shifted uncomfortably. It was a mistake, he said softly. We thought humans were extinct. We thought they were insignificant. Elias studied them for a long moment. Then slowly he allowed himself a small, ironic smile. Underestimate me again and you will regret it. His voice carried authority, a calm warning that startled even the senior scientists. Dr. Valrix motioned to the instruments. Let us assess his physical condition, carefully. Revel connected sensors to Elias's limbs, chest, and head. Vital signs were displayed instantly. The human's body responded quickly. Muscles that had been dormant for centuries began generating energy. Neural signals increased in strength. Blood circulation returned to normal levels at an astonishing rate. He is incredible, Reval whispered. The human body is adapting at a rate we have never observed. Elias flexed his fingers, lifted his arms, and then carefully rose to stand on the platform. His posture was steady, balanced, and strong. The Varelians watched in silent awe. Their mockery had completely vanished. They no longer saw a weak relic. They saw a being capable of surviving the impossible. Talrex stepped forward, curious but cautious. Can he endure tests? We must understand his physiology. Dr. Valrix nodded. Prepare controlled simulations. Nothing harmful. Observe how he reacts under mental and physical stress. Elias's eyes narrowed. He did not fully understand their intentions, but he sensed a challenge. Humans thrived on challenge. Even after centuries of isolation, his instincts told him that survival depended on understanding the environment, testing it, and adapting. The first simulation began. Lights flickered, creating illusions of gravity changes, minor obstacles, and abstract shapes that tested his perception. Elias reacted instantly. He adjusted his stance, moved with precision, and completed the simulated tasks faster than the Varelians predicted. The monitors showed neural spikes beyond measurement. The human's brain processed data, analyzed patterns, and responded with instinctual intelligence. Every movement was calculated, yet smooth and natural. Revel looked at Dr. Valrix with disbelief. His mind, it adapts faster than anything we have ever seen. He is learning from the simulation as it runs. Valrix's face was serious. This is no ordinary creature. It is humanity itself. They endure. They adapt. They survive when no one expects it. Elias completed the simulation and stood still, breathing steadily. He looked at the scientists and spoke slowly. You thought me weak. You mocked me. You called my people extinct. Now wait till you see what survives. The Varelians fell silent. They understood the words through the translator, but more importantly, they understood the meaning. The human before them had endured centuries frozen in the void of space. He had survived against impossible odds. He had awakened, and now he demonstrated that humans were not just survivors. They were adaptable, intelligent, and resilient beyond measure. Zilnar whispered, almost in awe. He is more than we imagined. Talrex nodded slowly. He is extraordinary, perhaps. We judged the Terrans too harshly. Elias straightened his posture. Do not judge too soon. Survival is not about strength alone. It is about will, determination, courage, something you may never understand. Dr. Valrix watched him quietly. We will learn, Captain Kane, and perhaps you will teach us what it truly means to endure. The lab was no longer filled with mockery. It was filled with respect, curiosity, and the weight of a new understanding. Elias Kane, the frozen human who had awakened after centuries, had taken his first step into a world that had doubted him, and he had already begun to change it. Outside the ship, stars glittered coldly, indifferent to the events unfolding within the laboratory, but inside a human had awakened, and the galaxy would never underestimate his kind again. And so began the journey of Captain Elias Kane, the human who refused to die, the human who had survived centuries frozen in space, and the human who would soon demonstrate that even one individual could leave an impact on the universe. Captain Elias Kane had now fully awakened. His body had recovered from centuries of freezing, and his mind was alert, sharp, and calculating. Each movement he made displayed precision, strength, and control. The alien scientists had already observed his physical adaptation, but now they were about to witness something more profound, the endurance and ingenuity of humanity itself. Dr. Valrix stood quietly, watching Elias with interest. Observe how he reacts to more complex challenges, he instructed. We must understand the Terran mind as well as the body. The laboratory shifted. Holographic projections filled the room, creating intricate simulations that tested memory, reflexes, and problem-solving. The aliens designed scenarios that would challenge even the most intelligent of their own species. Shapes moved unpredictably, gravity shifted subtly, and abstract patterns appeared to distract the subject. Elias's dark eyes scanned everything. Each pattern, each movement, every change in the simulation was analyzed in seconds. He moved gracefully, avoiding obstacles, solving puzzles, and adjusting to changing conditions. The Varelians watched in stunned silence. Raval whispered to Talrex, "He is learning as the simulation runs." "That is impossible. No species in our records adapts this quickly." Valrix nodded. "That is humanity. They learn, they adapt, and they overcome. Observe closely. This is what we underestimated." Elias completed the first round of simulations with ease. His breathing was steady, his posture strong. Yet it was not brute strength that impressed the scientists. It was his calm, methodical approach. Every step he took was purposeful. Every decision he made demonstrated strategy and instinct combined. Zilnar, who had mocked him when he first awoke, now stepped back in awe. He is extraordinary. He did not just survive. He is mastering every challenge we present instantly. Talrex adjusted the sensors to monitor his brain activity. "Look at this. His neural responses are beyond measurement. He is predicting outcomes before they happen. This is not just adaptation. It is intuition, experience, and instinct working together." Elias paused for a moment, observing the scientists. He spoke slowly, his voice firm yet calm. "You wanted to see strength, not just muscle, not just endurance. You wanted to see what survives when hope is gone. Humanity does not give up. We never have." The aliens listened. They had recorded his words and observed his performance, but now they were hearing the truth behind it. The human before them was more than a specimen. He was a symbol of survival, courage, and willpower. Dr. Valrix stepped closer. "You speak of hope. Tell us, Captain Kane, what kept your species alive when all seemed lost?" Elias's gaze grew distant for a moment. Memories of Earth flashed before him. Oceans, cities, friends, the mission to preserve knowledge, and the moment their world had been on the brink of collapse. His voice, when it returned, was steady and resolute. "Hope," he said simply. "Hope and determination. We reached for the stars because we had to survive. We fought because we had to endure. Even when everything fell apart, we held on to the future. That is what makes humans strong." The Varelians were silent. None had expected to hear such words, to feel such conviction. Their species valued logic and efficiency above emotion, yet here was a creature whose resolve was absolute. Valrix motioned toward a new set of tests. Let us test him physically now. Not to harm, but to observe true endurance. The laboratory floor transformed. Holographic platforms simulated extreme environments, sudden changes in gravity, shifting terrain, and obstacles that challenged balance and strength. The aliens expected the human to struggle. They had underestimated him before, and many still believed he would fail. Elias stepped forward confidently. His feet adjusted perfectly to the simulated surfaces. His body responded immediately to gravity shifts. He climbed, jumped, and maneuvered with a speed and precision that astonished the Varelians. Every test that would have disabled a normal alien left him unharmed. Every calculation, every adjustment was instinctive, Rival whispered in disbelief. He is completing these trials faster than our models predicted, faster than any species we have encountered. Zilnar shook his head slowly. I mocked him when he first awoke. I thought he was weak. I was wrong. We all were. Elias finished the final simulation and stood tall, breathing evenly. He looked at the aliens, calm but commanding. Strength is not only physical. It is the mind, the will, and the heart. You cannot measure it with machines alone. You cannot mock it and you cannot break it. Talrex stepped forward, curiosity mixed with respect. And yet your body survived centuries frozen in space. That alone is beyond comprehension. Elias's gaze softened slightly. Survival is more than the body. It is a choice. Even when frozen, even when everything seemed lost, I did not stop trying. I did not give up. That is what humans do, Dr. Valrix observed carefully. Captain Kane, you have proven far beyond our expectations. But we must know more. How did you survive the cold, the void, the isolation? Elias smiled faintly. Preparation, knowledge, and instinct. My pod was built to protect me, but I survived because I refused to die. You cannot break a species that refuses to accept extinction. That is the difference. The aliens were silent. Their mockery had completely vanished. They now understood that they were not merely observing a creature. They were witnessing a force that defied logic and expectation. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was alive, and it could endure the impossible. Valrix finally spoke aloud. We came here to study the past. But perhaps we are witnessing the present, the last testament of a species that should not be forgotten. Elias's eyes scanned the room once more. He was no longer wary. He had assessed the aliens, their intentions, and their limitations. He had survived simulations, tests, and the shock of awakening. Now he was ready to teach, to demonstrate, and to reclaim the dignity of his species. The Varelians had one final challenge for him, a controlled mental simulation designed to test the limits of reasoning and strategy. They believed they could predict his responses and measure his intelligence. Elias entered the simulation chamber. Holographic walls lit up with complex patterns, shifting mazes, and unpredictable threats. He moved confidently, analyzing every detail. While the simulation changed and adapted, he changed with it. Every prediction, every obstacle was countered with speed and precision. He learned faster than the machine could respond. The Varelians watched in disbelief. Their calculations failed. Their instruments could not measure the human mind. Their predictions were meaningless. One by one they realized that they had not awakened a weak specimen, but the embodiment of ingenuity and resilience. Rival whispered, "No species could adapt so quickly. He is beyond our understanding." Valrix nodded solemnly. Perhaps humans were never meant to be understood. Perhaps we were meant to learn from them. Elias emerged from the chamber, calm, composed, and fully in command of himself. He looked at the scientists, and for the first time, his voice carried authority over the room. You thought me weak. You mocked me. You underestimated me because you believed history could erase me. You were wrong. You cannot erase a species that refuses to die. You cannot mock a spirit that refuses to break, and now, you see the truth of humanity. For the first time, the Varelians bowed their heads slightly in respect. Their pride had been challenged. Their assumptions had been shattered. The frozen human had awakened not only his body and mind, but also the understanding that humanity, even in the absence of a planet or civilization, could endure, inspire, and command respect. Dr. Valric stepped forward and placed a hand lightly on the console. "Captain Kane, we underestimated your kind. Teach us, show us the ways of humanity. Help us understand the strength we once ridiculed." Elias's dark eyes gleamed. "Then listen closely. Watch carefully. Learn not only from what you see, but from what endures when everything else fails. That is what it means to survive. That is what it means to be human." The lab, once filled with laughter and mockery, was now silent with respect and wonder. Outside the laboratory, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the events within. But inside, a human had awakened, and he had reminded the galaxy of the power of endurance, courage, and will. And so Captain Elias Kane, the last human, stood tall in the center of the laboratory. He had survived centuries frozen in the void of space. He had faced mockery, doubt, and disbelief. And now, he had shown that humanity was not just alive but stronger than any of the aliens could imagine. The journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to solve, knowledge to share, and tests of resilience to endure. But one thing was certain. The human spirit had returned, and the galaxy would never underestimate it again. Captain Elias Kane's story was no longer about survival alone. It was about awakening, defiance, and the unstoppable strength of a species that refused to fade quietly into history. Captain Elias Kane stood in the center of the laboratory, his posture calm but commanding. The Varelians had watched in awe as he demonstrated the full extent of human endurance, adaptability, and intelligence. No longer a subject to mock or doubt, Elias was now a teacher, a symbol of what humanity could achieve even in the face of impossible odds. Dr. Valric, once skeptical and prideful, stepped forward. "Captain Kane," he said quietly, "we have underestimated your species for centuries. I see now that humanity is not only clever, but resilient in ways we could not predict. Your presence here changes everything." Elias's dark eyes studied Valric and the other scientists. "I do not claim to be superior," he said. "I only survived. Humanity survived. And now perhaps we can help one another." The Varelians listened closely. Elias spoke slowly, clearly, his words carrying weight beyond their translation. He explained the mission he had once led, how Earth had sent explorers into the stars to preserve knowledge, to survive the collapse of their civilization, and to ensure that humanity's achievements were not lost. "We were never weak," he said. "We were determined. Our bodies may be fragile, but our minds and our will are strong. Survival is not about strength alone. It is about courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to give up." The aliens absorbed his words. Their species had always valued efficiency, logic, and control. But here was a creature who had endured without any of those advantages. Elias had survived by choice, by will, and by knowledge. Valric nodded slowly. "Perhaps we can learn more from you than we could from our simulations and records alone. You are not just a human, you are a living lesson." Elias allowed himself a faint smile. "Then listen. Watch carefully. Humanity's strength lies not only in surviving the impossible, but in using knowledge to turn challenges into opportunities." Over the following days, the laboratory became a place of collaboration rather than mockery. Elias guided the Varelians through the technologies of his pod, explaining how it preserved his body and mind for centuries. He shared insights into human physiology, showing how the body could adapt, recover, and endure in extreme conditions. Talrex, the senior biologist, observed him with fascination. "Your body recovered faster than any model predicted," he said. "It is remarkable. Your species' ability to endure is beyond comprehension." Elias nodded. "It is not magic. It is preparation, resilience, and the will to live. We survive because we must. That is the difference." The Varelians were amazed not only by his physical capabilities but by his intelligence. He devised new methods to repair the ship's failing systems, using principles that had been lost with his species. Machines that had been non-functional for decades were brought back to life under his guidance. Rival, who had been the first to mock him, now worked closely alongside him. "I cannot believe it," he admitted. "We laughed at you, yet you are saving our technology with knowledge we could not understand. You are teaching us the value of adaptation." Elias moved among them calmly. "Adaptation is not about avoiding challenges. It is about facing them with determination, learning from every failure and using every opportunity to grow stronger. That is what humans do." The Varelians began to see humanity in a new light. They had considered the species extinct, fragile, and inconsequential. Yet here was one individual who embodied centuries of human ingenuity, courage, and endurance. They realized that they had been wrong to mock a species capable of such strength. One day Valrix gathered the team. "We face a choice," he said. "The Zathari core is approaching a dangerous star cluster. Systems are failing. We could lose everything. Captain Kane, perhaps your insight can save the ship and our lives." Elias stepped forward and studied the readings. The energy output of the star cluster was unstable, and the ship's shields were at risk. Using principles from his past mission, he recalculated trajectories, adjusted energy flows, and devised a method to stabilize the ship using limited resources. The aliens watched in awe as Elias worked swiftly. Every action was deliberate, precise, and effective. Within hours, the ship system stabilized. What seemed impossible had been accomplished. Zilnar, still in disbelief, whispered, "He saved the ship, with knowledge we did not even possess. One human saved us all." Elias turned to them calmly. "One human can accomplish much when they refuse to give up. Imagine what humanity could achieve if it still had its home world and its fleets. Never underestimate the power of knowledge, courage, and determination." Valrix placed a hand lightly on the console, his eyes meeting Elias's. "You have changed our understanding of life and survival. We mocked you at first, yet you have shown us the true measure of strength. Humanity is no longer a memory. It is a force that deserves respect." The other scientists nodded in agreement. Even Zilnar, who had once laughed at the frozen human, bowed slightly in acknowledgement. The laughter and mockery that had once filled the laboratory were replaced with reverence. Elias allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had survived centuries frozen in space, endured skepticism, and faced the doubt of an entire species. He had demonstrated human endurance, intelligence, and willpower. Now he had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be human. He spoke once more calmly but with authority. "My species may be small, my world lost, but humanity is not gone. It lives in every act of courage, every choice to survive, and every mind that refuses to accept defeat. That is our legacy." Outside the laboratory, the stars shone quietly, but the Varelians saw a new light, the light of human resilience, ingenuity, and spirit. They had learned that one human could challenge expectations, defy limits, and inspire even the most advanced civilizations. Days passed, and Elias continued to teach, guide, and inspire the alien scientists. He shared strategies for exploration, problem-solving, and survival. He helped them understand that life was more than efficiency and logic. It was endurance, creativity, and courage that defined the true strength of a species. Valrix spoke to his team. "We came seeking knowledge of the past. Instead, we have witnessed the present. Captain Kane has shown us that a single individual can change the course of understanding and survival. Humanity is not merely a subject of study. It is a lesson for all intelligent life." Elias listened quietly, then smiled faintly. "You see only what survives. That is the truth. Life is fragile, but willpower is eternal. Knowledge and courage endure when everything else falls away." The Varelians began documenting his methods, his strategies, and his insights. They realized that they had not only witnessed history, they had witnessed a living legend. The story of a human who had survived centuries frozen in space, awakened among aliens, and reminded the galaxy that humanity could endure, was now theirs to carry forward. In the following weeks, the Verelians spread the tale of Captain Elias Kane across the Andrix galaxy. Stories of the frozen human who awoke, survived impossible odds, and taught alien scientists the true meaning of resilience traveled faster than any ship or signal. Humanity, once thought extinct, was no longer forgotten. It became a symbol of courage, endurance, and the indomitable spirit of life. And as for Elias, he stood on the bridge of the Zathari core, looking out at the stars. He felt the weight of history, the responsibility of survival, and the quiet satisfaction of having proven that one human could not be ignored. He whispered to himself, softly but with certainty, humanity is not gone. As long as I live, it has a voice. As long as I endure, it has hope. And one day the galaxy will remember us not as extinct, but as a species that refused to be erased. The Verelians watched him silently, their understanding of life, strength, and endurance forever changed. They had mocked the frozen human, expecting weakness. Instead, they found courage, intelligence, and the will to survive beyond measure. Elias Kane, the last human, had become more than a survivor. He had become a legend, and across the stars the galaxy would never underestimate the power of humanity again. The frozen human had awakened, the galaxy had listened, and the story of Captain Elias Kane, a human who defied time, space, and doubt, would be remembered for generations to come.